Unfortunately, in this world, money is the equalizer. You want to go and be free, but without money, it's very difficult to say you're truly free. So people say, oh, you're going to work yourself to the bone and you're never going to spend time with family. Well, technically, I worked for 10 years and now I don't have to work anymore ever again.
This is Justin Brock, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about how he grew a brand.
There's so much generic marketing out there that people don't put any brand on because they're afraid that the brand is going to hurt the return. But that's a really short-sighted way to look at anytime you spend money or time or energy on marketing. So any content that we've ever put out, typically always going to have some sort of, brand.
How to build enterprise value, literally go into a market that is full of competition and get outsized returns and way more on how he literally sold his business for $70 million.
It's hard to get to, 50, 60, 70 million dollars or more. There's plenty of people that I know that sold for more when you're trying to take all this time and give it to people that aren't on the same journey with you.
Make sure you watch till the end of the video because we're going to be talking about how he made the transition from buying things like Lamborghinis for happiness to actually pivoting to this thing that you might value from a ton. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If we have not yet met, my name is Johnny Nitafan, and we're back with another Telesales Mastery podcast. Again, I'm your host, Johnny Nitafan, and we have a very special guest that has not only been on massive podcasts like Ryan Pineda's channel or even like the Digital Social Hour, but we literally brought him live. I don't even know how we got him here, but Justin Brock coming in all the way from, where are you at now, Mississippi?
I'm currently in Tupelo, Mississippi. I'm in between trips. We're heading to Italy on Tuesday, so you got me right at the right time.
Sweet, man. Well, again, thanks for coming on here. I wanted to start with something that I found. It seems like that just from seeing like an outside point of view, that you are a master at. And I don't even like you probably see all the behind the scenes. You are understand that, but one thing that you've been really good at from just afar is just branding. And something that I've really admired just from seeing you in different places, as far as like building an actual brand that is really reputable, right? And so I wanted to like go start there, right? Like, how did you start the Bobby Brock Insurance brand? Yeah, from the start.
Yeah, so I mean, for all we kind of have a house of brands here. So we
Yeah.
have Go Guru, we have Medicare Con, then there's the personal brand, and then there's BBI, and there internally you would have, if you were here, you'd think we had branding identities or branding identity crises, multiple times,
Yeah.
but there's always been this core emphasis on making sure that any marketing we do, anything we do, always have some sort of element of branding. We never want to do. There's so much generic marketing out there that people
Mm.
don't put any brand on because they're afraid that the brand is going to hurt the return. But that's a really short-sighted way to look at anytime you spend money or time or energy on marketing. So
Mm-hmm.
any content that we've ever put out, any broadcast television, any direct mail, any seminar mailing, anything we've done from a direct to consumer standpoint or agent standpoint, is typically always going to have some sort of brand. Now, in that process, we've had to figure out, like, how do we want to be known in what circles, and when is it important to have a different brand for a certain product or service that we offer. Um, and so we have kind of a house of brands that we're working on turning into a branded house slowly. And so we do use BBI as that kind of branded house concept. And I shied away from that for a long time. And then eventually it was just like, you know what, we're just gonna put everything under BBI and then be who we're going to be. And part of that too, like, people would talk about branding and say you don't want to ever put your name in anything. But then I listened to Donald Trump talk to Grant Cardone, and
Yeah.
he said, why would he put any other name on the building but Trump, And so,
Mm-hmm.
love him or hate him, we all know he's done a pretty good job branding. He was probably one of the early original iconic personal brands before
Mm-hmm.
social turned that into kind of a thing, right? So, and since then, you start thinking about, you got Edward Jones and J.P. Morgan Chase and all these groups these are
Yep.
brands, but they're names, right? And then in other brands, the biggest brands in the world, the other biggest brands that aren't name related are are words that don't exist outside of that brand. Like, what does Coca-Cola mean other than that brand,
It's
right? You know,
yeah.
what is Humana? Humana is a made up word, right?
Hmm.
So like this idea that I'm going to create some generic name like senior stability, solutions or whatever, like to me, those are not real brands. And so I'd actively advocate for people to use a name. If you're going to get into a big brand, you could do something like how we did with Go Guru, where we just kind of made up a concept.
Yeah.
But overarchingly, like I feel like pouring everything behind the Brock name for us gives us immediate association within our niche at this point, and so that's powerful.
Yeah. What are some lessons that you have learned about branding as you've built all these different brands under the BBI?
Yeah, um, it's so one thing we started doing is we use the same logo for every one of them, other than Medicare Con for some reason. But like every service and product that we have, we started using like simultaneous logo. Creating a bunch of different brands simultaneously can it can split the attention, and but it also takes you more time and energy from your team to
Hmm.
focus on. So anytime you can find ways to streamline that development process, sharing of the same logo so that you're like a platform company and all these platforms are associated with the same logo versus like redesigning. Another thing that's important is if you start hiring marketing people, so like we have full-time marketing staff. I used to try to hire
Yeah.
marketing agencies and all that, and over time, it's not that all of them are bad or any of that, but I had less control than when I just went and built my
Hmm.
own marketing team. And when I started building my own marketing team, one thing that graphic designers like to do is design brand new concepts all the time. Well, eventually that's not good. In the beginning, you're like, oh, cool, they're really good at designing new stuff. But then it's like
Hmm.
their default is let's design a new thing because they're artsy and they're, artistic and
Yep.
they want to have an artistic outlet. And as a business person, you're like, well, we want, I want to harness your creativity, but use it to pour back into the overarching concept. So make sure as you hire marketing people or artistic people, creatives, that you're not allowing the creative to drive the business. You still have to be the person thinking about what's best for the business while harnessing their creativity.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. As like a newer agent, as you like grow up, like for like if you're giving advice, right, to an agent, say like me that has small team and really trying to they see the vision of building a brand and they see the importance of it, but maybe you don't have the capital to be able to actually like last, right? You have to have money actually coming in. What's the balance of direct response versus actual like branding as you go? Because obviously branding is going to make sense. We hear and think of Coca Cola now, but
Mhm.
there had to be a point where they were actually making money along the way. So what's the balance when you're starting out, and then is there a transition phase where you're just focusing on branding?
So I'll say I would kind of say it a little bit. Like what you're saying is perfectly makes sense, and even today we definitely use practices that help us get immediate return on ad spend to
Yeah.
fuel the long-term marketing plan. In the beginning, I didn't have a lot of sight of that concept, so
Hmm.
everything was using Facebook and direct mail. So let's start here. I started with brand new with using regular BRC direct mail, like a lot of agents do,
Yeah.
and so it was completely unbranded. Mine were Medicare supplement rewrite BRCs. I was mostly using target leads. And then eventually I started using back in the day precise leads to buy internet leads as well. So I was buying generic lead flow. And but all of my activity locally, I had business cards. I was, Justin Brock, and I was going in building that personal brand consumer wise or direct to consumer and with small business affiliation through BNI groups and CDF, which here is like the Chamber of Commerce,
Yeah.
um, and then just every single house doing that. So I'd say think of your brand like in the beginning is every time you have a communication or contact with someone, you can brand. So a lot of the branding is email signatures, business cards. In the beginning, the cheap stuff. You're
Hmm.
doing it with your time until you have enough money to start to pour into that. But then even at that point, like now when we go to scale, let's say I hire 10 more LOAs in August. Well, I'm not going to take those internal brand new agents that I just got licensed and have them work in my highest quality, highest intent lead flow that
Yeah.
comes from that branded lead flow. I'm going to have
Hmm.
them working in the beginning, our aged, lead development leads. But then, even when I graduate them from that, I'm graduating them to more transactional leads, more leads where people are coming in because there was some sort of bait and call to action. I don't want to say bait and switch, but there's some sort of bait, right?
Yeah.
It's not a bait and switch because the bait is tied to the core product that is being advertised. But I need them to prove themselves on that lead flow and then take the revenue from that immediate return on ad spend and be scaling the branded lead flow so that over time they have a path to be promoted into a pipeline where they get more and more of that high intent lead flow.
Yeah. And that's what I found is like YouTube, right? Like YouTube is a great platform that if you can actually get leads from there, those are the best, right? Just organic overall is just
Mhm.
way better than paid advertising, but you have to it's all like a culminate they all culminate together, and it's all like an ecosystem that works together, and the more that you pay, the better the brand grows overall.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, so you started, like, how'd you even get into Facebook advertising? Because I know that you started like way before like it is now.
Yeah, so when I started running Facebook ads, it was 2014, so it was 10 years ago, and the platform had only recently been monetized. I think maybe 2012 they started monetizing something like that, and so you couldn't run ads on it up until that point.
Hmm.
And so most of the people that were running ads initially, I would assume, were like large brands, but we were one of the first, insurance focused, like agency type of ad runners. And
Yeah.
honestly, the biggest mistake I made in Facebook ads early on was thinking that I was good at Facebook advertising when really I was just one of the only people doing it. So you didn't
Yeah.
have to be good at that time. And the second tier of that is because I didn't understand the game I was playing. I thought the success I was having on it would last forever. And it's not that Facebook isn't still good. I still think there's underpriced attention on Facebook, but it's certainly much more expensive now than it was
Hmm.
then. And back then, you could throw up, the simplest ads, and people would just be calling your phone. Like the same thing though with broadcast television. 10 years ago, when I started doing some very small budget broadcast television at $2,500 a month, 3,000 a month, that would get your phone ringing. And now I'd get less off of 20 or 30,000 a month on broadcast television than I was getting on 2,500 or 3,000 back then. So it is competitive, but there's
Hmm.
always room to find the things that other people aren't doing yet. And if you can find those niche things, like I was listening to I always kind of listen to, the guys like Gary Vaynerchuk and Russell Brunson and then some spinoffs of those on the marketing side, Dan Kennedy. And if
Hmm.
you think about marketing, there's a couple of things you can do. You can be so creative and high intent on the marketing and spend enough time and money dripping that you get a really good result. You know, I, it's difficult for most people getting in, but you got to start thinking like a business that has more money before you do so that you can learn how to compete with those people. And sometimes that might even mean getting access to the money when you don't have it. But
Hmm.
I digress. You go back into to listen to those guys. The other day I was listening to Gary Vaynerchuk, and he said like most people associate certain platforms with certain age groups and certain demographics, right? And so
Yeah.
if you think about what social media platform is most dominated by the Medicare age population, let's say, or the 60 plus population, um, that's Facebook. And that's also where everybody's
Yeah.
advertising doing that, right? So
Yeah.
what he was saying is there's still an exceptional amount of those people on TikTok. So,
Hmm.
but most people are not advertising for them on TikTok. So the person that can figure out how to do that has a severely underpriced attention. Same thing with whatever it is, Instagram or LinkedIn might have more of them. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's as many of them there as are on Facebook,
Yeah.
but it doesn't really matter that there's not that many, right? Because there's
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah, for sure. What are like the key metrics that you're looking at when you're looking, say, at a Facebook ad campaign that you're like, this is actually prepped and ready to scale? We can actually just start dumping money on ad spend. Is there a certain like number, KPI, like metric that you're actually looking at?
In the beginning, it's we just have ideas and we start them, and I mean, we want our, there's sometimes there's audience size and budgets that we look at, but it's not like we have some sort of graph where we're like, okay, if there's 50,000 in the audience, spend this much a day. It's more just kind of you look at, trying to get your targeted audience. We love niches where you can say teachers in, Utah, or truck drivers in, Wisconsin, whatever that is. Like if you can
Yeah.
niche down and be able to target them, then you get that core audience, and then you can figure out what your budget can be. We're always Facebook is finicky. Like it's like there's a code to crack, but once people start cracking it enough, they change the code. Same thing with Google. So if you like for
Yeah.
a little while, daily budgets might be working, and then you might have to move to lifetime budget to get the same result you were getting on daily budgets, which you would think like, why would that even matter? But for some reason, it seems to. Um, so I think most people with Facebook ads that they get turned off to them because it's a little bit of trial and error to crack the code at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I even went through a period where we got off of Facebook, so like it doesn't work anymore. Well, we just had to figure it out a little bit more and understand that none of this stuff stops working. Just like direct mail. People are like, oh, direct
Yeah.
mail returns are dead. It's like, well, yeah, sending the exact same direct mail to the same area for a long period of time, then yeah, they're going to die. So you're going to have to change your messaging. You have to change direct mail, maybe go into different geo targets for a little while. Same thing with seminars. People say seminars are dead. Maybe you just exhausted an area for a little bit, go to another area for 2 or 3 months, then come back
Yeah.
to your area. Boom, it's replenished itself. Um, Especially in Medicare with people continuously turning 65, like that's a new, that audience, it increases by, it's like 7,000 people a day who are 65 and older die, and around 10 to 11,000 are turning 65. So it's a naturally replenishing and growing audience right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, it really won't stop growing until about 10,000 people a day are dying, and then it'll plateau, which we're not there yet because so many of that baby boomer population is just not close to that
Yeah.
mortality table in. So it's just this naturally replenishing audience that's always there, whether it's direct mail, Facebook, anything. So, if as long as you can get your targeting right and you get into a groove, you get into that
Mm-hmm.
groove, then see the point of diminishing returns. The main thing we're really looking at is return on ad spend based on perceived first year commissions, and making sure that the cost per acquisition is lower than that first year return on ad spend, and then everything year two and on is profit.
So are
There
you
are
are you good with like just breaking even on a starting? Or are you looking at like a 2 to 3x return, like ROAS, as far as that goes?
Yeah.
And then
So
okay,
as
that's
long as
good.
we're looking at ROAS being the first, we use ROAS as the first year commission,
Yeah.
and we're okay on lead sources, certain lead sources breaking even in the first year. If they're, I would even go as far as to say wouldn't be too perturbed if they're 15 to 18 months out, as long as it's a super high quality lead source. Like when
Yeah.
you're getting an educational SEO T65 type of deal, like those highest quality groups, or the local branded just calling in, like it's okay that it might have cost you $500 to get that client because they're going to be on the books for years, and we're playing the long renewal game.
Yep.
However, the lower transactional marketing, I expect to have a lower cost per acquisition so that I could, be profitable in the first year, because I don't know what the long term, the lifetime value of that client is. So I
Yeah.
need to have some return in the first year. Plus, I use the first year return on ad spend, where you're getting 2 to 3x business to fuel the long term brand growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I think most of the best agencies are doing, is playing one game where they want a 2x plus on first year return on investment or return on ad spend, and then they're using that profit to invest into the longer term profit. That's the gift that keeps on giving, or the longer term lifetime, higher lifetime value clients. Most agencies are going all in on first year return on ad spend,
Mm-hmm.
or and that tends to go to a lower quality prospect,
Yep.
or they're going all in on brand and they plateau and they can't grow very fast. And it's the mixture that builds the best long-term, business, where you eventually you have this inversion in your cost per acquisition because your referrals go up, your branded lead flow goes. There's people that are coming in, couples retiring, that have been seeing us now branding for years, and because of those years of branding, we could shut off all marketing and we still have people walking in the door or calling in, consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start looking at that diminishing cost per acquisition from that branded lead flow, it really offsets, all the higher cost per acquisition
What is
stuff.
that actually like? What are the different sources? Because obviously, like the direct response is going to be in the first, like going hard on first year commissions is probably going to be Facebook direct response, but then it's going to pivot. What are you shifting that spend to? Is that like a lot of TV commercials, or that still more in the realm of the straight direct response? What are you looking at?
I think it's still direct response, but you're changing the messaging. The messaging is more purely educational. There's not strong call to actions. There's not strong bait. It's really messaging. So
Hmm,
if my copy
that's
is
good.
relative to Part B givebacks, food cards, um, maybe even in Medigap, like Save Money, or if I'm trying to give them a gift card to let us sit with them to sell final expense, all that kind of stuff, those people are going to, if they respond to that from you, they'll respond to that from anyone.
Yep.
Whereas the messaging, when it's longer, educational, long term value, 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 those people take longer to get through to, but you're also not competing with many people doing it to the level that we're doing it. And so, like, once you get them, you basically never leave them. And I see a lot of people that are focusing, like, I work so hard on retention and Medicare, and I'm like, well, we don't really, because so much of our business comes to us in such a high quality fashion that
They're not
we'll
going
send them
anywhere.
one small newsletter a year, and then there's a few email drips, but like, and then about 4 years in, we'll call them all to check on them. Like, we'll have the admin team just start calling through in the slow season in the summer. But like, we don't really stress ourselves out with retention because you're acquiring them at that rate. I think a lot of people that stress themselves out on retention are probably dealing with clients that they're really afraid would leave them, or they think they're going to leave and they're not going to leave. You know, they're basically train, and we deal with this a lot at our behind the agency event when agents come in. So many of these people are training their clients to be a pain in their ass. By telling them, you need to call us every year, you need to check on that, and they'll send them like a sheet that says fill this out and send it back for your annual review. Well, it's hard to grow in a zero sum game. Like, we already own that policy, and so I'm not saying that some of them don't need to check on things. So what we do is send them more passive newsletters that is like, you'll get an annual notice of change. If you think you need to change something, you can give us a call. But most people don't need to change things year to year. Give us a call if you need anything, and that doesn't like tell them, because then if you're telling them fill this out and send it in, they're doing that because you told them to, not because they believe they need to change anything. I want all the people that believe they're good to just stay on their policy, and then I can go after
Mm-hmm.
more new business.
Yeah.
If they absolutely need to change or believe they need to change. Now, some people say, well, I don't know which ones need to change, and they won't call in, and then the first quarter they'll call in mad or whatever. Well, first quarter when they call in, you can fix them because you have OEP, you have SEPs like crazy right now in
Yep.
Medicare, so in ACA. So it's not really like you have to do that stuff in AEP, but I want to capitalize on that fourth quarter psychological effect where people think they need to change then to get new business. You capitalize on that. We call it the fall surge. I think Mutual of Omaha may have coined that, but that fall surge of business, you want to
Yeah.
capitalize on the momentum for new business, not service.
I honestly like that a lot because I think that's where a lot of agents fall into is they're servicing admin, focusing on those things that aren't driving new business. But especially as the pure business owner, the main sales guy, like you have to consistently bringing new business in so the business can keep going. I want to transition this a little bit, right? So you sold your company I don't know exactly what it was. I saw on your Instagram $70 million, which is huge. What are like the things that you did really well to build enterprise value in your business to be able to like prep to actually sell that?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of wins over time. We had that early Facebook win. I've had some, early seminar group wins that helped get us revenue going. But one of the things that, made us stand out, a lot was early on, and I have to give credit again where credit's due. I was listening to Russell Brunson and Gary Vaynerchuk, and they were talking about once you know how to do something, teach other people how to do it. And then Gary Vaynerchuk would say, document your processes for
Yeah.
content and just, don't pay attention to what the profit is today, just document it and build a following. So we started,
Hmm.
as I was running a small agency and growing, just documenting our numbers and putting things out there. And then we created a Facebook group because I read an article that said Mark Zuckerberg was going to put more emphasis on the groups in the algorithm. And this was I was reading this at the end of 2017. So right at the beginning of 2018, we started a Facebook group for agents. That really grew. I think
Hmm.
there's 14,000 agents in there now. And then but we didn't really, the big deal was the reason they were following us is we were putting stuff out there, but we weren't selling them anything. We weren't recruiting. As a matter of fact, when they would ask to come to us, I was referring them to other FMOs. Now, eventually, we took that attention and we're like, well, we'll create a different side of our business now where we help these people with certain things. So we came up initially with some mini courses that were like Facebook course ads courses like people were doing back then, but ours was the only one at the time for Medicare and health insurance, right? Everybody else
Yeah.
was like doing it for Facebook ads for entrepreneurs. It was super general.
Yeah.
And so I was adapting that for our niche, and of course I was selling it cheap as hell at the time, but eventually we grew that information content. We started doing some events, and then we at some point, I think it was January 2020, Steven Martinez, who was one of my LOAs that was helping me with a lot of tech, and myself quit selling and started working on the business. We had about 5 or 6 more LOAs at the time, and 2 admin employees. And
Hmm.
we were just like, January, it's January, we're entering that outside of AEP, we're going to stop selling, we'll push all the business to them, and then we're going to work on creating this process. And then when we started creating that, we created the FMO side, we started improving um, the events. And it's funny now looking back, it looked so ghetto, like what we were doing back then. But we were like, it's just because no one else was doing it. We didn't look ghetto to everybody else. And now
Yeah.
it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. But the enterprise value really is that when you have an AmeriLife or an Integrity, to me they're a platform company, and so what they do is they do all the financing, accounting, and they take on all your legal burden, your finance and accounting, your IT, all this kind of overlord stuff of big business that small businesses tend to just kind of neglect because you're just like, I don't have time for that. I got to sell and
Yeah.
market. We became the bottom portion of that platform company. So what we are is we're a sales and marketing platform company. So we started working with other agencies to sell, market, and scale or streamline. So we started promoting LOA office or LOA culture. And it wasn't that we were telling people to go out and recruit people into an LOA contract. We're saying
Hmm.
hire people who don't want to be insurance agents, but make them
Yep.
LOAs and hire employee-minded insurance agents. And so we started promoting the LOA concept. We started our behind the agency workshops and some of our coaching programs, and then people would come through and they'd be like, wow, I learned a ton. And even though they paid for it, they were like, we still want to work with you on
Yeah.
contracting. And so then we developed the FMO side where we weren't really going out after brand new agents. We were looking for the agents that needed help scaling, and their FMO, it's not that their FMO is holding out on them. A lot of these FMOs are just not capable of helping do that because they haven't actually built an insurance agency. They've built an FMO, which is a different type of business. And so I think that it's just one foot in front of the other. The grandiose vision was always capitalize on the attention and promise, 6 inches in front of your face. And then over time, it came into focus that it was like, wow, we actually have an insane value proposition for the strong independent agent or the small agency owner trying to scale. And so that's what we went after. We wanted We wanted the independent agent who was, writing a couple hundred, 300 apps a year, but was like, now I want to hire some people. And we wanted the agency owner that maybe had already hired some people, but was like plateauing.
Yeah.
So we could be like, here's what we did when we hit that plateau mark. So kind of like what Alex Hermosi is, does acquisition.com, or Cardone Ventures does, but they do like big, broad business. Ours is just super focused on these
Medicare
businesses
agencies.
instead of, yeah, and instead of going out and like acquiring them, which we would potentially do that, we can do it where they pay up to a certain period, and then we have a hierarchical relationship that picks up past that.
I
That
see.
has kind of been our focus, and it's like early on, somebody told me it was an old traditional FMO founder and said, well, you either charge or you recruit. And I was like, no, I think it's actually easier for me to not ask for your contracts
Oh yeah.
and on it and build a relationship on you paid for information, and then prove to them through that information that we have the support and staff and team and processes and systems that they need. And then we don't even have to ask them for contracts. They just ask us.
Yeah.
And and then it's so that person was wrong. So if they watch this, I always say it. I never say who it was, but they're just wrong. It's just old thinking. Sometimes you got to think
Mm-hmm.
outside the box and change the industries you're in, because if you're not change the industry you're in is going to change. You can either be part of the change or you can deny it's changing and just watch it change all around you.
Yeah. Dude, I like that a lot. So what like was the main like driver for like did they buy out your personal brand and like just everything all encompassing, or was it like a main thing that was like this is what I really like, or the company that really likes that they're buying out?
I mean, we'll start here. Private equity, platform companies, they have to deploy capital. They have capital partners that come in and say, here's billions of dollars. They have to buy EBITDA. So
Yeah.
number one, Paramount, they are concerned about your EBITDA first and foremost. So let's start there. Number two, and it's a distant number two, they're concerned about your growth trajectory, your net growth trajectory. So like, they're looking at the last 3 years to see what you're growing. So we were at like 34 to 36% every year net growth. I know a lot of people are like, we're at 250% growth. Well, in the beginning, that's easy, but
Yeah.
eventually you get big enough where, it's difficult to grow
Yeah.
200% in a year, very difficult, without some sort of anomalic event. So honestly, say 200% growth may even scare them because it's not something they can predict. But 34 to 36 was like, that's pretty ideal because it's like, it's strong, but it's like, we believe they can keep that up. Um, I'm not saying don't go for 200% growth year. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
as you get bigger, it's more difficult. Um, so that was number two. Number three, past that is what they're doing sustainable and compliant. Is what they're doing. Is it like they don't? There are certain agencies I know that had higher EBITDA than ours that haven't gotten picked up because when they dive into their marketing, they're like, this isn't sustainable because if CMS catches this, they're going to shut it down, or if carriers catch this, or if they care, that's the difference. Is sometimes some of this stuff has been let go, but in this kind of environment where it's like touchy, they
Yep.
want to make sure it's compliant. So outside of that, is it a culture? Is it a company culture fit? So they want to make sure that this company is going to be good to work with. Intertwining the personal brand into it, I do think that there's some concern, but I know with AmeriLife, as we partnered with AmeriLife,
Oh, okay.
they they do the way their deals are structured is they have retained equity. So like true retained equity, like where you actually own a percentage of your business still, versus like where you're basically profit sharing in it. That's not true retained equity. So I own 49% of our company's still, and they own 51%. So they do own
Oh,
a
I see.
majority. But I think that they feel like if they do, somewhere between 30 and 49% retained equity for the partner, that even though their personal brand is a big part of the business, that personal brand is still involved and still growing. And mostly they're worried about the next 3 to 5 years because they're worried about, let's deploy this capital, then let's go back to more capital partners and get more capital. That's how companies work. And and then, of course, if they thought that I was going to leave, I'm sure that they'd want to start preparing for who's going to replace that person. Um, and I would venture that, like, even though mine might be more of a personal brand than the average acquisition, uh, they they most insurance agencies have some degree of personal brand. Like,
Yeah.
even if it's small town agencies, they have that likeness. So they do have agreements in there where they get to use your name and likeness for certain periods of time. Like, I think with ours, it's like if you left the company, they have like a full year they can continue to use your name and likeness. Um, there might be certain assets, but, like, no, they didn't buy any of my social media channels or any of that, even though I use those heavily to fuel our business. They didn't take them. So,
I see.
um,
So that's
so
all
like
yours.
technically I could leave and go do my own thing, but I wouldn't be able to compete for a certain period of time within the same sector. So if I
Yeah.
was going to, like, platform, I'd probably be like, okay, I'm going to go do something in whatever, real
Like
estate or,
general business or something.
yeah, general business. Like, I just have to make sure that, and I'm not planning on doing that because I still own 49% of the company. But, let's say 3 or 4 years from now, if I wanted to do that and I wanted to go general business, I would just talk to their legal team. Like, here's what I'm looking at doing. Because I do know somebody that sold and then went and was consulting in the same space, but they decided it was a conflict. So you just have to be careful that just because you're consulting, if you're consulting in a way that technically impedes with the business that they bought, that they might have a non-solicitation or non-compete argument. Um, and litigation is nasty. So really, it'd be better to just get their blessing on what you're trying to do, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. It's good, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on here. This is good stuff for me. I know a ton of people that are watching this are going to get a ton of value from it as well. As we wrap up here, I like I want to touch on this really quick, because you and I were talking before. Like, you're in this concept now that, like, hey, I'm out here, like, you can buy happiness, right? Like, what, like, talk a little bit about that kind of as we wrap up here, because I really and like this point, especially from you, somebody who has made millions of dollars and has sold a company, that a lot of people do strive to get to that point. Talk about your thought process, like, or perspective and worldview now on the other side of it.
Yeah, so like we were talking about before, I'm working on a book, a concept book called "How to Buy Happiness." This is the first time I said it anywhere, but um, it's goes along with, like, Dan Martell's "Buy Back Your Time"
Yeah.
concept. But there's only certain things that hold up when you buy them to what you, or I would say not even hold water, but, like, are far exceed expectations. There's only certain things you buy that far exceed the expectations. Um, and I'm reserved in saying people because I don't want it to sound like slavery, but, like, when you buy people time and
Yeah.
you buy and train employees, um, that is one of the things, right? That is so rewarding. Not and it's rewarding, one, because you're offloading a task, but it's also rewarding in that and I can't remember who I heard say this, but it was, one man's trash is another man's treasure applies to work as well. So, like, you might have something that you're like, man, I'm tired of doing this. I want to outsource this. I want to buy, time by hiring someone and then get them to do it. But that job that no one wants to do could be the job that they want to do and that they feed their family with, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really rewarding to create the work and then pay somebody to do it and they're happy about it, like, where it's a win-win
Mm,
and where they're
yeah.
adequately paid for it. On the other side of that is, buying experiences with your family and your friends, and your key employees, your partners. Like, that never is a letdown for me. Experience. So paying money to, for something that you need, but where you also see other people win in that process is massively impactful and super valuable. And then buying experiences with your family, friends, key partners, employees. that's massively impactful. Everything else, and that's kind of what I was getting at to backwards engineer into it. Like that's the epitome of what you should be aiming for. The low level stuff like cars, watches. I mean, I like watches. I wear nice watches. I like
Yeah.
them, but they're never the they're really only as good as the experiences that they can help me have. You know, or the like, give you an example. This is a perfect example. I did when we sold. I went and bought a Lamborghini Huracan. I wanted a Lamborghini Huracan, Spider, Evo, Stealth PPF Black. I do
Yeah.
like the car, but I
It's
don't. I
beautiful.
like it mostly because I get to ride around with my wife or ride around with my daughter with the top down. But then also, like, there's a little boy that lives about 25 minutes from here who has Lamborghini posters all over his walls. He's 5 years old and he's having a birthday party in 3 weeks. And his parents asked me to come surprise him and like show up in it and take a ride and all that kind of stuff. So I think your video went off for some
Yeah,
reason.
yeah, my camera went off. But yeah, that dude,
I mean,
that's
you're good.
awesome. That's really
So,
cool.
but that kind of like paying for those experiences and paying for that time, with your family, being able to go places and do things like I feel like when people say you can't buy happiness, it's because I believe you can use money as a resource to buy happiness. Now there are things that are uncontrollable, like there are people that get sick in your life and things like that, but like you can if you use it to help people and buy time and experiences with people you love and care about. That is the happiness. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, in this world that we live in, money is the equalizer.
Hmm.
You want to go and be free, but without money, it's very difficult to say you're truly free. And so people say, oh, you're going to work yourself to the bone and you're never going to spend time with family. Well, technically, I worked for 10 years and now I don't have to work anymore ever again. So I would argue that if you understand the process, you just work really, really hard, intently for a period of time, and then you don't have to work. I choose to work now because guess what? I actually really like doing what I do. So, and I think that most people that find some sort of epitome of success or whatever that is, find any, I guess, relevant or substantial level of success. I feel like those people always want to continue to work to some degree
Yeah,
because they enjoyed the process, if
for
that
sure.
makes sense.
No, that's good. Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that, man. And that's really good insight. For me, especially as that's a goal of mine, but from you as like giving that advice is really huge and impactful, especially for me. So appreciate
When the
that.
crowd,
And
like sometimes the people that have never succeeded will give you the advice of, it's all about family, spend more time with your family, enjoy the process, all that stuff. And it doesn't hold the same weight. What I'm saying is
yeah,
do everything Johnny wants to do, and then but just understand that the things that you'll probably end up finding the most enjoyable along the way is seeing other people win, feeling like you helped with that, and then using your money to buy time and experiences. I'm not telling you don't buy a Lamborghini because it is fun. I'm not telling you don't
yeah,
buy a watch because it is nice, and some of those things actually help you network with other people. So, like the watch thing, it's like I can go into certain environments and you get picked out for networking with people faster than so there's an appearance standard or there's something, so there's some value in some of that, but like the ultimate value is the time, the experiences, and seeing other people win, and
yeah.
that's
It's
not
huge,
lip
man.
service. That's just true. I didn't know that until I witnessed it, and I was like, it's the happiest thing in the world for me is seeing my family win, and then my team win. The people, and I honestly think, you only have so much time. For me, I have an immediate family that I created. It's really just me, my wife, my two kids, my brother. That's kind of my immediate core family that I have all the time in the world to drop anything to do anything for them. And then the people that work with me and my key partners in business, that's it. I don't got like intermediate friends because I tried. I don't have anything in common with them.
Yeah,
If they don't, if they're not my immediate core family like that, and I'm not even like, I love my extended family and all that, like cousins and all that stuff. I love them, but if they're not on the, if they're not on the same path as me, I don't really have time. I end up being like my best friends and all that end up being the people that work with me. Um, and I'm adding that in because, you know, it, it's hard to get to, 50, 60, 70 million dollars or more. There's plenty of people that I know that have sold for more. Um, when you're trying to take all this time and give it to people that aren't on the same journey with you, if
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah, 100%. My camera's chirping out. But no, I appreciate you coming on here, man. Where can people like follow you um as you kind of go about life, man? I love your story. So where can
yeah.
people reach
So
out to you?
few spaces, obviously, like you said, YouTube is always great. YouTube.com/Justin Brock, Instagram at the Justin Brock, and then of course on Facebook we have a Facebook group. The main title of it's Medicare Monsters. It's a great group. Even if you hate me, that's a good group. It's full of people that are always adding value to one another in the life and health space, with a pretty heavy emphasis on Medicare.
Yeah. Sweet, man. Well, guys, if you like this video, subscribe right now. Share this with a friend if you found it valuable, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.